All right. This is the DPMA seminar on MCAT and education and the importance of that to get into medical school. And so I'm Kody Hafen. I'm the VP of Academics for DPMA. And we're just going to go over like the MCAT, mostly the MCAT, a little bit of grades and stuff like that that will help you get into medical school. So let me share my screen here. Sick. And that's unfortunate. Okay. So we're going to talk about the MCAT just for you guys that don't know. The MCAT's called the Medical College Admissions Test. Um, and so what's on the MCAT? There's 4 sections of the MCAT, just some basic things. It's going to be chemistry and physical foundations of biological systems, CARS, which is critical analysis and reading skills, biological and biochemical foundations of living systems, and then psychological, social, and biological foundations of behavior. So basically the first is a lot of chemistry. The main parts of the first section is chemistry, OChem, biochem, and physics. And then CARS, what it's testing you on is your reading and understanding skills and being able to pick out the main topics and supporting ideas. So the CARS section is definitely one where you have to practice the actual CARS in order to get better. The other ones are a lot more information driven. So the biology section, the third one, is a lot of biology, physiology, anatomy, biochem, OChem, and it does throw a little bit of physics in there, talking about, sometimes blood or pressures in living systems as well. And then the last section is psychological and social behaviors, is just the psych-soc section. And so it tests a lot on psychology, sociology, and it also tests a lot on experimental procedures like independent or dependent variables, and if the experiments are valid or not with p-values and stuff like that. And so that's a lot of the psych-soc section as well. And so what we're going to go into is how much and how can I study for the MCAT. And for everyone, this is going to be different. There's different companies that do MCAT prep, right? There's like Altius, or there's Blueprint, or, there's probably 50 different companies that do MCAT prep. Personally, I use what's called MCAT self prep. It can be 100% free if you want it to be, and the upgrades to upgrade stuff isn't quite as expensive. Altius and the other companies are going to charge, for the full package around $1,000 to practice for the MCAT and teach you about the MCAT, which really the investment in the MCAT is what's going to be able to help you get into medical school. And so, to pay $1,000 to get a good program really isn't that bad, considering that, you want to get the MCAT right on the first time, because every time you take the MCAT, it's, about $350 a pop every time you take the MCAT. And so, to invest in a good program or to study a lot, it's important so you guys can save money as well, because it's expensive to apply to medical school. And so the best way to gauge how much you need to study is by taking practice tests. And so as you're studying for the MCAT, or maybe you think you're a genius, and so you take the MCAT, a practice test, and you get a 520 the first time, really you don't necessarily have to study a ton, because the 520 is a really great score to get into medical school anywhere. But for, most estimates, or for at least a minimum estimate, at least 400 hours of studying for the MCAT. This is going all over all of your biology, physiology, anatomy, gen chem, OChem, biochem, physics, psych, soc, everything, so you can get down the basic fundamentals. And what they say about the MCAT is you don't necessarily need to know deep into subjects, but you need to know like a football field wide of subjects and about an inch deep. And so what that means is you need to know a broad spectrum of all these theories and equations, but you don't need to know the deepest part of them, but you need to go and have a broad understanding on how they interact, and especially in the biology and chemistry and psych-soc sections, it goes into a lot of intertwining things with biology and sociology, or biology and psychology or physiology and physics. So it goes into a lot of different things as well. So that's why it takes so long to study for the MCAT. And it's recommended to start studying 3 to 6 months before the test. Obviously, you can study for longer than that, but 3 to 6 months is a good range to be able to, really study those things that you need to study. Also, it's good to have all of these classes done before you take the MCAT, just because if you take both of your bio 1 and 2, physiology, anatomy, gen chem 1 and 2, biochem 1 and 2, ochem 1 and 2, physics 1 and 2, physiology and sociology, then you have a base of knowledge before you even start studying. So then it's more like reviewing all the things that you learned in class, so that, maybe you'll be able to learn more efficiently, because you learned it once, you're able to recall it, learn it, and remember it better the second time you learn things. And so that's the key, is to have all those classes done before you take the MCAT, which helps in retaining that knowledge for when you take the MCAT. And really, yes, Hannah. Yeah. And
wait, sorry, what was her question?
She just, on the screen, it just had a little box on it that was on the projector.
Okay, got it. Go ahead.
And then another question is how's the MCAT scored? What do I need to do to get into medical school, right? What kind of MCAT score? And so every section is graded from 118 to 132. And this is the possible score that you can get, right? And so a possible score for each section that you can get. And so if you get 132 on every single question, you'll get the max score on the test, which is a 528. A good score, the average score, right? The average, about the 50th percentile, is usually a 500. And so if you get a 500, you're about right in the middle of the pack. And that's, that's better than about 50% of the people that take the test. However, to get into medical school, the median average of matriculates that get into medical school is about a 110, 111, 112, around there. And so when you're looking at that, most medical schools, you want to shoot for a 110 to 112, just to make sure that you're in that group of median people, or the average people that get into medical school. And obviously a score that's lower than 512 will still get you in, but we'll talk a little bit about that as well a little bit later. And so when you get that score that's like a 5, let's say it's a 515, a great score, and then you also get your percentile score as well. And so percentiles work is like, so let's say that you're the 50th percentile. That means you did better than 50% of the people that took the test. So if you got 99th percentile, right, you got a higher score than 99% of the people that take the test. So if you get 100th percentile, you're the best person that took the MCAT in the nation that day. And so that's important too, as well as your score, is your percentile score, because sometimes that can show a lot, right? So let's say if you only scored like a 510, but you scored on the 75th percentile, that still shows that you scored better than 75% of the people that took the test that day. And so, and also when you take the test, it takes about a month to score. So if you're looking to apply to medical school in June, right, you can obviously send your application before you get your MCAT score back. But if you want your MCAT score before you send in your applications, you're going to want to take the MCAT at least 1 month before you take, or you submit your applications, so you can get that score back. Let's go to the next. Okay, and then what do medical schools do with my MCAT score? And so I'm going to share my other screen. Let's see. I don't know where that's at. Okay, sweet. So this is MSAR, or AMSAR, or whatever you want to call it. the medical school admissions requirements. And I'm just going to go through this really quick just to show you what medical schools do with your MCAT score and your GPAs. And so right here for the University of Utah, I'm just going to pull up the one that's, the in-state university for an MD. And it has your medium MCAT is 513. And so, but that doesn't mean that the school only accepts people above 513. That just means that the 50th percentile, the middle student of their, 120 people that got accepted, that the middle score is 513. So that means they've accepted 60% or 60 people below 513 and 60 people above 513 because the class is 120. And so if you're looking at that, that means if you don't necessarily get a 511, 512, or even a 513, that you're still going to be looked at to be able to get into the University of Utah. And so then you can look at the minimums as well. So I'm going to go down to acceptance data, and then I'm going to go to in-state applicants, right? We can go to anything, but I'm just going to go to in-state applicants to look at their MCAT scores. And so then it shows you the median MCAT score, which is the 513, but then it also shows you the ranges of people that also got in their scores. So the 25th percentile, so the person that got better than 25% of the other people that got accepted to the University of Utah got a 509. So that still means if you get a 509, that there are other people with 509s that get accepted to the University of Utah, and you can keep going. And the 10th percentile, right, is a 505. That means that people that got a 505 still did get accepted to the University of Utah, depending on probably their other application strengths, right, like their GPA or their personal statement or hours. And so then you can go down even further, and it shows the median scores for all of the sections, right? So the median score for almost all the sections is 128, but you can also see in the University of Utah also has a minimum threshold of 500, which isn't on here, but they do say that they have a minimum threshold of 500 for the MCAT. And for each section, they have a minimum threshold of 125. And so definitely on the MCAT, you want to shoot for every category over 125. And at least for the University of Utah, you want to score over 500. And so that's how you can kind of look on the schools that you're looking at applying to and say, hey, I need to get, about a 513, 512, but realistically, if I still get a 508 or 509, I can still apply to this school because there's still people accepted. Or even University of Utah, there's no harm in, sending in your application if you get a 505. Right? Because there's still people that get a 505 and get accepted to medical school there. So I'm going to go back to my presentation. So that's what medical schools do with your application is first, that's the median scores, but also it's more of a screening process. So you take the MCAT, let's say you get a 515, and the University of Utah says you need a 500 and a 125 on each section. And so what it mainly is just to get you in the door, right? To get you an interview. And so a lot of the schools use this as a screening process. Let's say you get a 480, right? Just a really bad score. Most schools will just automatically kind of file your application out because you didn't reach the minimum requirements. But if you do reach those minimum requirements for the MCAT and GPA, medical schools will then go and give you an interview and see how it goes from there. Right. And so it's kind of a screening process to eliminate the people that really didn't study for the MCAT or really aren't capacitated to be able to pass their boards, right? Which is a gauge of how well you can take tests and how well you can study is what the MCAT's for. And so if you can't pass the MCAT, medical schools kind of look at that and say, well, you can't pass your boards. And you're not going to pass medical school. So why would we accept you? So that's kind of the theory behind that. And then academics and GPA, just like AmStar had the MCAT minimums and medians, it also has medians and minimums for GPA as well, and also science GPA. And so on your application to medical school, one thing that's important to remember is if you're getting good grades on all your general classes, but you're bombing every single science class that you have, medical schools also look at your science GPA as well, because that's going to be mostly related to the classes that you have at medical school is going to be science related. So if you have a 2.0 in all your science related classes, but you have a 3.0 overall, right? Then the medical school is going to say, well, why do you get a 2.0 in all your science classes, and why would we accept you if you're failing all your science classes in undergrad? You're not going to be able to pass your science classes in medical school. So that's also why it's important to get a good GPA. And so GPAs, you can also look on ANSAR, I'll pull that up as well, are important, right? And just as important as GPA, but it's also going to be one of those screening things, right? So you can see here the total GPA and science GPA, right? Total GPA, the median is 3.82. However, it is shifted a little bit to the right on this graph. So you can see that, a majority of people are going to have more scores closer to higher than 382 than lower, or I guess there's going to be more scores less than higher. And so if you do have like a let's see the minimum, 3.5 GPA minimum is about what they're looking at for the University of Utah, and 3.31 minimum for your science GPA. And so as you look at this, you can kind of tell, well, this is where I want to be, is about a 3.82 or 3.7. But if you have less than that, you can also still get accepted to medical school. It's just, to strengthen your application, you'll obviously want to be at the median or above to increase your chances of getting into medical school. Hannah, any questions? Colin, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I think you hit all the points that need to be hit. It's what we hear from Doug and the rest of the med advisors that we've talked to. So
yeah.
So far, we talked about this, but we're studying together.
Yeah.
Just for future people that might watch this, what resources have you found the most helpful so far?
Sweet. So the question is, what resources have I found that have been the most helpful so far? So definitely through DPMA, I do take practice tests every month, which helps a ton to see my progress. That resource is huge for me. One other resource that Hannah has is UWorld. And UWorld is like another testing program or testing company, right? That gives you sample MCAT questions and passages so that you can be able to test your knowledge without taking a whole practice test. One other thing that I found very helpful is on MCAT self-prep, you also have the ability to buy the flashcards. And so I go over flashcards on MCAT self-prep, and also on Key. There's a deck of flashcards that I use that I'm able just to flip through and just review all the subjects and be able to make sure I know exactly what the different terms mean. Because a lot of the times what the MCAT does is it tests you on similar processes and similar theories, right? And so especially for the psych-soc questions, it gives you very similar answers that you can pick from. And so a lot of the times you need to know individually how each one of those theories differ for socialization, right? There's going to be 4 main theories of socialization, and it'll give you all those as answers, but you need to know what's the difference between each one to differentiate what one's the right answer depending on the question. And so those have been big to me, as flashcards, UWorld, and also taking practice tests. I use the Miles Downs deck. Yeah, that deck is really good. It just gives you a very good broad range of general terms and general theories that you need to know to be able to really lock down what you need to know, and what's the difference between operant and classical conditioning, and what's the difference between each step of operant conditioning. It really helps you differentiate the terms that you're going to be asked on the MCAT. Well,
that's solid.
That was solid.
Thank you,
I think that's good, right?
Yeah, I don't have any questions unless Hannah has any questions. I think we're good to go.
Yeah.
For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you for taking the time to educate yourself on the MCAT and the academics of the process of getting into medical school. And yeah, thank you again, Kody. You were great. Great presentation.
Hopefully you all get into medical school just like we do.
That'd be all right. Happy studying, guys.